The Colosseum, Rome. The year is 73 after the death of Christ, midday, when the summer sun beats down on 50,000 spectators packed into stone seats that radiate heat like an oven. The roar of the crowd is deafening, a physical force that seems to shake the sand covering the arena floor. A woman stands alone in the center of the arena, chains hanging from her wrists and ankles. Her name is Lucia, age 19, daughter of a Roman senator who backed the wrong side in a recent political dispute. 3 days ago, she lived in a villa with marble floors and slaves who attended her every need. 2 days ago, soldiers came to her home and arrested her entire family on charges of treason. Yesterday, her father and brothers were executed quickly, which Roman law considered merciful for citizens of their class. But Lucia is not going to die quickly. She is going to be humiliated. She wears a thin tunic that has been soaked with water, making it transparent and clinging to her body. This is deliberate. Around her neck hangs a wooden placard with words painted in red, "Traitor's daughter who thought herself above Roman law." The crowd reads it and their roaring intensifies. They did not come here to see mercy. They came to see shame transformed into spectacle. 4 men enter the arena. They are not gladiators. They are not soldiers. They are actors from one of Rome's theatrical companies, hired specifically for this performance. They carry props, a wooden throne, crude mockeries of imperial regalia, a whip made not to kill but to mark. The crowd understands immediately what entertainment has been planned. Lucia does not yet know the specific details of what the next 3 hours will entail, but she understands the essential truth. She is going to be forced to perform her own degradation for the amusement of 50,000 witnesses. Everything that gave her identity, her dignity, her sense of self, is about to be systematically destroyed in the most public way possible. And the destruction will be so complete, so thorough, so carefully designed, that even if she survives physically, the person who entered this arena will cease to exist. The lead actor approaches her with the wooden throne. He speaks loudly enough for the nearest spectators to hear, his words spreading through the crowd in waves. The traitor's daughter thought herself a queen. Let us show Rome what happens to false queens. The crowd erupts in approval. This is not random violence. This is not spontaneous cruelty. This is calculated, systematic, carefully choreographed public humiliation that Rome has refined into an art form over centuries. What happens to Lucia in the next 3 hours has been planned by officials, rehearsed by performers, designed to send specific messages to specific audiences. The Roman system of public humiliation was as sophisticated as their engineering, as brutal as their military conquests, and as enduring as their architecture. Here is what they never taught you about ancient Rome in history class. You know about the gladiatorial games, the chariot races, the bread and circuses that kept the population entertained. You know about Roman military conquests, their roads and aqueducts, their law codes that influenced Western civilization. You have seen romanticized versions of Rome in movies and television shows that focus on heroic figures and dramatic battles, but you've never learned about the systematic public humiliation rituals that Rome used to maintain social control. You have never heard about the deliberate protocols designed to destroy individuals so completely that their humiliation served as warning to entire populations. You have never discovered why Roman sources describe these spectacles with the same clinical precision they used for describing engineering projects, as if destroying human dignity was simply another technical challenge to be solved efficiently. Tonight, you will discover what Roman law prescribed for public humiliation and why these rituals were considered essential to maintaining order. How the practices were systematized with specific protocols documented in legal texts and administrative records. What Roman historians, philosophers, and officials wrote about the purposes and methods of public degradation. Why archaeological evidence confirms that humiliation spectacles occurred daily across the empire at massive scale. How survivors who recorded their experiences described psychological damage that modern trauma experts immediately recognize. If you want to understand the real history of Rome beyond the sanitized versions taught in schools, subscribe right now. Comment below telling me where in the world you are listening from, because these hidden truths about how empires maintain control deserve to reach every corner of the planet. The victims whose suffering was recorded in Roman sources deserve to have their experiences acknowledged rather than forgotten. Let us begin with what you thought you knew about Roman spectacles. Then systematically dismantle those comfortable assumptions with evidence preserved in Roman sources for 2,000 years. The Romantic narrative tells us that Roman games were primarily about entertainment, spectacle, giving the masses what they wanted to keep them happy and docile. The actual reality that legal texts, historical accounts, and administrative records reveal is that entertainment was only one function of a comprehensive system designed to demonstrate power, enforce social hierarchy, and make resistance to Roman authority psychologically devastating. The scale of Roman public humiliation is difficult for modern people to comprehend. Rome, at its height, ruled approximately 50 million people across an empire spanning from Britain to Mesopotamia, from North Africa to the Rhine. Maintaining control over this vast territory with relatively limited military forces required sophisticated systems of psychological control. Public humiliation was not peripheral to Roman power, but central to it. The Colosseum in Rome, completed in 80 AD, could hold 50,000 spectators, but it was only the largest of hundreds of amphitheaters built across the empire. Every major city had facilities for public spectacles. Smaller towns had theaters or open spaces where humiliation rituals could be performed for local audiences. The infrastructure required to implement these systems empire-wide reveals their strategic importance to Roman governance. The theoretical framework was sophisticated and openly discussed by Roman writers. Seneca, the Stoic philosopher, wrote extensively about the purposes of public humiliation. He argued that witnessing the degradation of those who violated social norms reinforced proper behavior in observers. Cicero, the orator and statesman, discussed how public spectacles created emotional bonds between the state and the population through shared experience of witnessing punishment. Roman legal theorists wrote that the severity of punishment should be proportional not just to the crime, but to the social status of the criminal, with humiliation serving as appropriate punishment for those whose crimes were against social order rather than against individuals. This reveals something crucial. The Romans thought deeply about why they humiliated people publicly. They analyzed it. They debated optimal methods. They wrote treatises about psychological effects. This was not sadism disguised as justice. This was social engineering implemented through carefully designed rituals. The legal framework established specific categories of humiliation for different crimes and different social classes. Roman law distinguished between citizens and non-citizens, between freeborn and freed, between upper and lower classes. The type of humiliation deemed appropriate varied based on these distinctions. A senator convicted of treason faced different humiliation than a freedman convicted of theft, which faced different humiliation than a slave convicted of rebellion. The system was precisely calibrated to enforce hierarchy. The economic framework made humiliation spectacles profitable. The Roman state did not bear all costs. Wealthy individuals sponsored spectacles to gain political favor and public recognition. Entrepreneurs bid for contracts to provide performers, animals, and victims. A sophisticated market existed for supplying everything needed for elaborate humiliation rituals. This created economic incentives for the system to expand rather than contract. The administrative infrastructure was extensive. Officials called editores munerarum organized spectacles with authority to requisition resources and requisition condemned criminals. Records tracked which criminals were allocated to which spectacles, ensuring efficient use of human resources. Professionals called lanistae trained performers and managed logistics. The bureaucracy supporting public humiliation rivaled the bureaucracy supporting the military. Documentary evidence survived despite 2,000 years because Romans did not consider these practices shameful. They documented them proudly in historical chronicles, legal commentaries, philosophical essays, personal letters, graffiti on amphitheater walls, and administrative records preserved in stone and papyrus. When Roman historian Tacitus describes humiliation spectacles, his tone is analytical rather than critical. When Pliny the Younger writes letters describing elaborate humiliations he witnessed, he treats them as notable events worth recording for posterity. When legal texts specify appropriate